Hi, I'm Andy Erickson, winemaker for Favia, and I'm here with some friends to talk about Harvest 2022. Glad you can join us. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so psyched that we can sit down and talk about Harvest.
Yeah.
How'd everybody do?
Good. I mean, it started out pretty crazy, but...
Yeah, I can't wait to hear all the stories. It's been a long one for me. I picked my first cab in August and just finished 2 days ago, so it's like 2.5 months of harvest. So a lot of stories. It's gonna be
Cabernet
fun.
in August. Is this the first year you've harvested Cabernet in August?
No, it's
you done it
not.
before?
But I think it's the earliest ever that we've done.
Thank you.
And I thought it was all going to be early, and then here we are.
You
End
never
of
know.
October,
You
we
never
just
know.
finished, yeah. So, cheers.
Cheers.
Happy harvest.
Happy harvest.
22. Everybody always asks me when I go home after harvest, what do you guys drink at home on a harvest day? And I love that we're sitting here, and I think you guys think like I do. When I get home, I want a beer. I'm not drinking wine. So
No.
a nice hoppy beer for me. What do you got?
I reach for the bourbon.
Nice. I like it.
I go for the gin and tonic.
Yeah, same.
Super
Gin and
refreshing
tonic.
and
Something.
yeah.
Very
Yeah,
refreshing.
to cleanse the palate.
I love it. Exactly, yeah.
When you're tasting Cabernet from 9 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
till 7 o'clock at night, it's a palate
Agreed.
cleanser for sure.
Okay, they say every vintage tells a story, and this one is no different. And for me, this is like the tale of two vintages. Like for me, early on, it was going to be early. You know, it was a drought year. Things were coming in early, and then we had that heat wave, and I just thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be done in like 2 weeks. And then a month later, we're still bringing in grapes, which for me is like, there's two different stories to tell. So I don't know. What do you feel about it?
Well, for me, it was early and fast. I mean, we picked the entire estate in 4 days.
Oh my God, how great!
Wow. I felt like I thought it was going to be like that, and my mentality, you know, during the heat wave in the early part of September was, okay, we're going to get it all in. The winery was full, so I had a bit of a delay. And then once kind of everything calmed down and the chaos settled, and then I got back out into the vineyard and reassessed everything. The weather cooled off. It was a nice refresh and a reset, and then there was the second vintage.
It was nice to have
Yeah.
that little bit of rain too, like after
Yeah,
the heat.
it was so
like,
refreshing.
That bit of rain, you can kind of take a break and say, okay, let's just regroup, get this done, and then
Take a
you know
breath.
there's going to be another wave. And yeah, how about you?
Yeah, the hillside blocks came in fast and furious, and then we have some blocks that are more on our valley floor at the top of Atlas Peak, and those ones took longer. So that was definitely the second wave, and so we took a little bit more time there. So
I feel like this vintage was so site-specific.
Yes.
I don't think there's ever going to be a blanket statement that can capture the vintage as a whole. I feel like it really depended on where you were, and even not just by AVA, but by block, really. I mean, I have a vineyard on Howe Mountain where one piece, one parcel that's just kind of a little higher in elevation, came in right at the heat wave, and then everything else fared perfectly fine, stayed really plump, and I just picked that about 10 days ago. So very, very site specific.
definitely.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's fun. In Oakville, I had a hillside block where we picked the upper half of it like a week before the heat wave, and then the other just had to come in like right towards the end of it.
Yeah.
But everything down in Coombsville and on the valley floor just was not even near ready.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to taste the wines once it's all said and done. I mean,
But right now, a beer. All right, ups and downs of the vintage. Let's hear, what are your highs and lows?
I think one of the ups for me was that it really, it was a perfect vintage to understand that risk versus reward concept where if you took a little bit of risk this harvest, the reward was exceptional. So I have a block of Cabernet from our Croquet Vineyard on Howell Mountain that it's an early site. I always have to pick it in September. And I always want it to hang longer, but it's a warm site. The nights are warm, so sugars are always fairly high. But this harvest, I decided to leave it through the warmer days, and I really pushed the limits more than I ever have. And I think it paid off. It's going to be the best
that's
vintage
great.
I ever make from that site.
That's really cool.
Yeah. But perhaps the downside was, we've been joking about this all harvest, where is it because of the heat wave over Labor Day weekend, everyone picked after that. It completely filled up the winery, and we have been joking about how if you've ever been a hostess at a restaurant in your time, that it's like seating the restaurant at all at the same
All
time.
at once, yeah.
And how that impacts everything else, the flow of pump overs and all the inoculations are happening at the same time.
Exactly.
So that to me was the crisis and the really difficult sticking point to move through. And I think we all learned a lot about the capacity of our facilities.
Totally. Yeah.
Probably the low is that heat wave.
Agreed.
Definitely forced my hand a little bit in picking, but overall, I'm happy with the quality of the wines. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was doing a winemaker dinner on the East Coast like a week before that, and it was shaping up just to be this stellar, perfect vintage. And I said, there will be a wrench thrown in, and I have no idea what that is yet. And then I got home and looked at the forecast and was like, all right, we got to start right now. And so,
Yeah, similarly, we were able to leave things on skins a lot longer this year than we typically, being a mountain site, we usually have to press things fairly quickly so the tannins don't get too aggressive. But this year we could really take our time, slow things down on skins. So that was unusual.
well, that's nice. Was that
for
because
us.
of the flow of fruit
I think
coming
it was
in, or-
because of the heat, and the tannin extraction was a lot slower this year than it typically is up there on the mountain. I don't know if you guys saw
Well, that's
similar
good.
things, but
Yeah, that'll be fun to taste.
yeah, kind of an up for me. But similar, we had a full house,
Yeah.
and the logistics were quite challenging of getting everything done that had to get done all at once.
Craziest thing that happened during harvest. Who's got it? Craziest thing.
I mean, I think for us, it wasn't necessarily crazy, but the most awesome thing was just watching the team come together when every tank was full and just watching everything work like a well-oiled machine. It was like, we had a few returning temporary workers for harvest this year, and just watching the execution of them anticipating each other's moves, and our cellar master kind of knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. And it was really thrilling to watch, just sort of.
So it was
knew that
crazy
sense.
because you were not expecting it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't crazy. It was just kind of rewarding.
I couldn't find any interns, so it was just my
yes.
cellar master and I doing all the work,
Yeah.
which
Oh, wow,
Wow.
that is crazy.
That is crazy.
I loved every minute of it. Though.
Yeah.
I loved doing the pump overs and
Yes.
shoveling out the tanks. So
That's awesome.
It's good soulful work.
yeah,
That's great.
It's one of those years where we're learning so much as we go, and this year was no different. It was a year where, what are the surprises? They're always different. You said you went away and you said something's going to throw a wrench. What's it going to be? But we're resilient. We're prepared and ready to kind of take away whatever Mother Nature throws at us for that year. So, yeah, kind of a good lesson learned.
For me, it's funny. I have so many different things that I look after every year, and so I've been saying for the past couple months that I've seen all manner of things this year. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, some vineyards that just normally are middle of the road that have totally surprised us. Other things, that we had to run out and make an emergency decision on some things, and then also just the idea that I just finished 2 days ago, that 6 weeks ago I wouldn't expect that would be the case.
No, not at all.
But nothing unusual or dramatic or scandalous, unfortunately. I don't know. I guess that's unfortunate.
Well, we've had amazing weather for the last 4 weeks,
Yeah.
so
really
it's
have.
like the
We've
perfect
been-
finish to harvest weather-wise.
No
Yeah.
pressure.
No.
Yeah.
Even now, it's still.
Yeah.
feels like we're coming in, cruising in for a smooth landing.
Yeah.
So
So I'd love to hear new things you guys tried in the vineyard and the winery. For me, this year was a year I learned that farming is an active pursuit. It's not a passive pursuit. I feel like in the vineyards where we like irrigated the right way, we put up shade cloth, where we had like misters and things like that, we really were able to get these vineyards where we wanted them. So for me, it was kind of a year where I learned a lot about farming and more than in the cellar. So really just being super active on the vineyard side was...
You know, go back a few months and into the early spring, and we actually had a herd of sheep on our Valley Floor vineyard in the Oak Knoll district for the first time. And it's something we've been interested in doing for a long time, and we have a lot of sites on Howell Mountain that are not really, conducive to having sheep. But this parcel on the Valley Floor is flat, wide open, 80 acres, and it was amazing to see the work that they did and how quickly. So it allowed us to have far less mowing passes and really one step towards reducing our carbon footprint, and was something that we'll repeat for sure in the years to come.
That's really awesome. We did try shade cloth for the first time in our vineyard this year, and I'm glad we chose this year to do it because it was a good year to have it. But even so, yeah, I mean, we still had blocks that we do sell some fruit, so we were able to shift to some other blocks that were more resilient through the heat. So I guess it was surprising this year, what you planned on and what actually resulted in quality fruit. Like you said, you had a block that typically isn't one of your highest quality blocks, but this year's showing really well. We found similar on our property. So, but the shade cloth was big for us and something we'll be repeating in the future for sure. I mean, huge with the heat, the temperature fluctuations we're probably going to see going forward. So.
We're gonna need another round here.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so how about collaboration? I mean, I always love when I get calls from winemakers during harvest, because for me, it's normally like a blackout period when the fruit starts coming in. All my friends, like, we don't call each other, we're just doing our thing. But I feel like this year was a little bit different, but...
Yeah, I have a great story about collaboration. I think this was definitely a year where I spent a lot of time in the Lafort office in St. Helena. It was right before the rain, and I had some Zinfandel that I really needed to bring in, and the winery was full, no tank space, and I was really stressing about it, trying to figure out how I was going to get this Zinfandel in the winery. And the woman that came in behind me was overhearing my conversation and said, "Oh, I have some tank space, and do you really need a custom crush option?" And the next day, it was a very short, brief interaction, and the next day I found myself bringing 20 tons of Zinfandel into her winery, and she crushed and fermented it, and then I shipped it right out. So it was about being in the right place at the right time, about kind of that, the Lafort as a business providing that platform for us, as simple as it is, for us to kind of come in and chit-chat and share stories and experiences. And then the result is kind of a new friendship and a new business professional relationship, and it was great. It was really fun.
How fun. That's cool.
I found myself texting with a fellow winemaker who's making wine on Oakville Ranch, and just like, what are you doing? How are you handling this situation? And it was incredibly helpful just to have someone to bounce ideas off of. And she came up and tasted with me at one point, which was really nice because being up on the mountain, we're kind of isolated, so we don't get a lot of visitors, certainly not people that I can taste with. So just having someone to, say, yeah, I'm tasting a similar thing in my wines, the tannins are extracting similarly, and it was really refreshing for me just to feel not quite so isolated.
Yeah, I work out of a custom crush facility, so your story makes me realize that I shouldn't take that for granted, because I'm surrounded by a lot of winemakers every day, and we're always chit-chatting and sharing stories and, on a daily basis. So that's actually a really nice benefit. I'm glad you called that out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that it reminds me in a way of 2011, which was really the last vintage for me, where the phone was ringing between all my winemaker friends, and we're sharing ideas about, okay, what are you going to do? Like, what's going on? Because it's this event that just affects everyone, and we're all in the same boat. And I think when you think about it that way, that we're all in the same boat and we're all doing the same thing, and we all succeed when we all succeed, it's it's pretty cool to know that you can reach out to your friends and get
Definitely.
advice or get a tank or whatever you need. You know, I
Whatever
mean,
you need in the moment.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to remember that if every vintage was the same and we didn't have these events or whether it's a weather event or something else, but if every vintage was the same, all the wines would taste the same, our jobs would be so boring. This is what keeps it exciting. It keeps us
Definitely.
learning, and there's a lot of value to that. It keeps our job interesting and exciting and fun, and it makes the wines taste different, and that's really an important piece.
Yeah, and I think, vintages like 2011 can really surprise you, because I tasted the Mayacamas 2011 vintage not long ago, and it blew me away. So I think, it's exciting to have the vintage to vintage variation. That's why we love it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And it keeps our professional life moving forward, where we're constantly learning and taking a little bit of what we know from each vintage into the next vintage. And that's what gives us experience of value. Yeah.
all right, so what do we think about the vintage so far? I mean, for me, like I said before, there's so many surprises. Like for me, the Valley Floor vineyards that I work with have shined. Some of the blocks that I didn't or normally don't think are going to be great are great. And we have this whole full spectrum of flavors. Like we've started picking early, so we've got that. We've got the ripe stuff from the heat wave. We've got the long hang stuff. So I think, I don't know, for me, we're going to have a lot of different really cool components to put back together. So what do you think?
I feel the same. So, I've just got our estate. So, I'm seeing elegance on the west end of the property, where we've got these nice bright red fruits, plenty of acid. The east end of the property, it's darker fruit profile, lots of blueberry, blackberry, and loads of power. So I'm excited about the road ahead and really finding the balance with some of the blends.
Cool.
Yeah. I think that I have a lot of single vineyard lots that are going to be fantastic and some of the best wines that I've ever made from these parcels. So I think there's a lot of really amazing standalone wines, but I also think that in the end, the blends are going to come together really beautifully as well, because we have Andy, like you said, we have tons of different blending material to work with, whether it was from before the heat wave, where things might have a little bit higher acid, to some things that may have gotten really, really concentrated and a little over the top, and then the wines that had a ton of hang time at the end. So there's a lot of really good components to bring together for blending, but I also have these parcels that are site-specific that are some of the best wines I've made from the site. So there's a lot of variability or a lot of variety and great things to work with. So I think it's going to be an awesome vintage. And the white wines too. We haven't really talked a lot about the white wines.
The whites
My white wines are
beautiful.
so great.
Yeah.
Super fresh acidity. I actually left my Viognier out through the warm weather in early September. And I'm going for a style of Viognier that's light and refreshing and not overripe and over the top, but it wasn't ready. And so I left it out, and the concentration was just incredible. Flavor development, and it's going to be an amazing year for whites as well.
Yeah, similarly, we had blocks that typically are good but not great, but this year they were great. So that's exciting. And for us, Cabernet Franc really shined this year.
Yeah,
We
same
have
for us.
some new blocks coming into production this year, and even for their first vintage, they're really phenomenal, really surprising. So we're really excited to have that varietal to use in our toolbox for blending. But yeah, similar with our white wines, the Chardonnay, it's beautiful, fresh, high acid. We picked earlier this year than we normally do, so we're gonna have lower alcohols, higher acidity. But the wines are tasting really beautiful. So
I saw the same thing with the Cab Franc. The color is so dark and the aromatics are so beautiful with Cab Franc. That's
gorgeous.
It's pretty interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely
I'm excited
did
about it.
well
Do you
this year.
think that that's because it had more? Is it because it had more hang time, or do you think it was the hot weather and the concentration, or what do you attribute
I
that
think
to?
it's a variety that surprisingly is tolerant to drought and heat in a way. I mean, it held up really well.
Yep.
And the wines are just really impressive.
Yeah.
From a lot of different sites.
Right.
Yeah. And I love Cab Franc, so I'm excited.
Definitely.
Do you bottle it on its own or just as a blender?
Not 100%, but we have a couple wines that are like more than 50% Cab Franc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do a varietal Cab Franc. I mean, 19 was the first vintage, but it's something we're gonna keep doing. So
Oh, great. I want to try that.
yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm super excited to see you all on Friday. We're going to be there for the winemakers celebration to celebrate this harvest officially. And this is part of the Collective Napa Valley weekend to raise money for fire mitigation, reforestation, something that we've all been affected by is
Oh,
the
yeah.
fires. So
For sure.
really great cause. And so thank you guys for being a part of it.
Cheers
I'm
to
really
that.
looking forward to seeing you.
Can't wait to go.
Cheers to everybody. Happy
Cheers.
harvest.
Cheers.